Take two.
I want to scream again.
Don't.
First, Bay of Pigs. What do you remember about the Bay of Pigs?
Well, I don't remember anything because I was probably 11 or 12 years old. So do you want me to still tell you what I know about it?
Yes, tell me what you know.
Well, I think there were some Cubans who had left Cuba who thought it would be a good idea to retake the island, and I guess Kennedy was on board with the idea, and then they landed uh, somewhere on the island of Cuba. But I think the support troops were held back so as not to cause an international incident. So they were quickly taken care of by the Cuban soldiers,
Right.
and it was a failed mission.
Right.
And then there were some people who were very upset that Kennedy had not followed through and didn't retake the island of Cuba.
Okay. Well, after all this happened, did your views on President Kennedy change at all?
Well, no, again because I was 12 years old.
All right. Well, so it didn't change your opinion on Kennedy at all? Your feelings? I know you were
At
10
the-
or 12 at the time,
at-
obviously not, but
at
later on.
Well, no, I still think he was an inspirational president, even if he made a mistake or two.
How do you feel he handled?
In fact, if he would have followed through with
Right.
with ground support, it probably would have escalated into a much greater conflict.
All right. So how do you think he did it? Do you think he did a good job handling the aftermath of the invasion?
I can't really speak with any
Certainty.
authority on that. I don't know.
All right. How did this affect your feeling about the
You get-
intensity of the Cold War?
How did that say it again?
How did it affect your feelings about the intensity of the Cold War? How did the Bay of Pigs affect it?
Well, again, you're asking me as a
Easy getaway.
you're asking me as a 12-year-old at the time what I thought about the Cold War, and
Just all right, not at the time, like when you learned about this in school, what you
I guess
currently know
this
about it.
I guess it was one more incident during the Cold War.
All right, let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
Assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. How old were you when that happened? Do you know?
Was
Around
it
what
in
age?
67 or 8?
Yes.
So
you
I
were
was
about 17
or
So you
18.
should remember this better, correct?
Well, I remember it better perhaps, but I probably didn't pay much more attention to current events than you do now. It wasn't my hobby at the time, as it may be now.
Yeah, you were a cool kid.
Well, I don't know about that, but I
what
wasn't.
what do you remember of the assassination when you were 17 or 18?
Just that Martin Luther King, who was a leader of the civil rights movement, was assassinated by some wacko.
Do you remember your reaction at all?
Again, I wasn't very political. I was more concerned with
All right.
getting my homework done.
Okay. Well, how do you feel now when you reflect back on the assassination?
Well, too bad that such a powerful leader was taken at a young age. He must have been 40 or so.
How do you think the assassination impacted America at the time?
I think it made some people think that maybe there was something wrong with the country. Maybe there was a cancer in the country. If the country could breed people who would do such a thing.
And do you think it affected segregation from that point on? The assassination itself. Do you think that had an effect?
I think the movement continued. Even without its leader, other people took his place.
Do you think if he wasn't assassinated, he could have?
It's not. I don't see my picture. If you care.
Yeah, the light turns off, but you're still
Still
recording.
filming?
Yeah. Do you think if he wasn't assassinated, he could have contributed even more?
Sure.
Any examples? Any ideas?
Well, no, it's hard to predict. They have movies and books about alternative histories that would have occurred if something hadn't happened, but I haven't given much thought to that.
And anything you wanted to last say on Martin Luther King?
No.
All right. The O.J. Simpson trial.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know a great deal about this because you're a lawyer and whatnot.
Well, again, that's not from the 70s, right?
Yeah, but you were 20 or so.
No, I was 45.
Okay, exactly.
We're jumping ahead.
My bad. All right. Well, do you think that O.J. is innocent or guilty? Why?
Well, that's a funny question. I do remember that in '95 I was driving upstate with your mother. I think we had just gotten married or were going to get married, and we pulled off to watch a football game at a bar off the road. and we pull into the bar, and they're not watching. It was a big football game, but they weren't watching it. They were watching the car chase. And
Mm.
we, what's going on? And it was OJ, they said, who was driving his white Bronco, and the police were following him on the highway. Anyway, so it turned out that he was accused of the murder of his former wife, mother of his children, and her friend, who was a waiter at the restaurant where she was eating that evening. And the evidence was overwhelming against him. Just the fact that he was suicidal after this had occurred uh, made everybody think that he was guilty as charged, and he had some. Uh, I think he immediately got onto a plane for Chicago, and they found blood in the driveway, and it was his blood
Mm.
they found.
So what do you think personally? Just yes or no?
Oh, it was a no-brainer that he was going to be convicted, and of course he was acquitted.
I know, but do you personally think
I
he was
per I
actually
was
guilty?
I was among the majority of people who thought he was overwhelmingly guilty.
Mm.
Now, just recently, in the last week or two, someone has come forward and said that it was he or his brother who actually did this crime at OJ's instigation. So there's always, and OJ had said when he was acquitted that he was going to spend the next part of his life devoted to finding the real killer. But there was never any media attention paid to what he may have done to find the real killer, when of course he was the real killer.
I gotcha. And what do you think about the glove not fitting his hand? Do you think that has a huge effect on the trial?
Well, it was a catchy phrase, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit, and people think that he either took some medication that caused his hand to swell, and then his attorney did that stunt with the glove, or perhaps he just kind of expanded his fingers in the glove when he showed that he couldn't really put it on. But again, there were shoe prints. I remember in the area of the murder that matched these expensive shoes that he was photographed wearing. There was overwhelming evidence against him.
All right. And I heard you bring up the attorney. They're actually called the Dream Team of Lawyers.
Yes,
Do you think how important do you think this Dream Team was for
I
him?
think it was overwhelmingly important. He had the best attorneys money can buy, and they
Right.
did a wonderful job.
And last question on OJ. Do you
Mm.
think that there is a racial divide in terms of whether or not he was innocent?
Well, there was the blacks on the jury acquitted him. The blacks in the community thought he was innocent, and he was set up, although he was, loved by blacks and whites alike before the incident.
All right. Let's move on.
He was a great football player too. I mean,
Yeah.
just as you watch the players now, he was the best.
All right. Watergate. Around what age were you?
Watergate, I was 18 or so, and again, I wasn't terribly
Interested in politics.
concerned
All right.
about it. I know that my mother watched it, and I would sometimes sit with her and we would watch it, but I wasn't, I didn't like Nixon
I got you.
particularly.
Tell me what you know about the Watergate scandal.
What I know is that um, some Republican employees were asked to break into the Democratic uh, headquarters and I guess see what they could find about what the Democrats were up to with respect to the election that was coming, and they got caught. And then Nixon pretended not to know anything about it, but then it was shown that he was very much involved in the break-in. So they cover up the whole thing.
We gotta hurry this up a little bit.
Sorry.
Do you remember how your parents responded, or how you responded to the scandal?
Well, no. I know that my mother watched, but and my father was
You
at
don't
work. They
remember.
had these hearings on during the daytime.
Do you remember if there was a general uproar among the general public after the scandal? Do you remember anything on the news, hearing
Well,
anything about it?
well, even today, just looking back, it wasn't like he committed a murder or anything. There were some people that burgled the Democratic headquarters to try to steal information. In a sense, it may have been much ado about nothing.
Right. And
They didn't cover up a murder, in other words. They covered up
I
a
got
little burglary, and they weren't stealing money. They were just stealing paperwork and information.
I got
It
you.
was almost like high school hijinks or something.
Sure. And do you believe that Nixon did the right thing by resigning rather than having to deal with the probable impeachment?
Well, Nixon was a horrible person who sent many thousands of people to die in Vietnam
Sorry.
and sent college kids to die in Kent State. So he was the poster boy for everything that's wrong in the country.
Right.
So did he do the right thing by resigning? Sure, he would have been convicted guilty as charged. What he did was impeachable.
So my next question was, do you think Nixon was a good president? You pretty much just told me your response on that.
Well, they said he wasn't the worst president ever because then Bush came along. That's Bush Jr. Of course. You want to get me started now that I'm into politics?
All right. That was Papa Perlman. We're done. Let's stop this.